The Al-Baqa Cafe was a popular restaurant on the beach near Gaza City, known for its great food, views of the ocean, and fresh air. It was a hub for families, artists, and journalists, and one of the only places in the area with somewhat reliable internet. The cafe served as a peaceful refuge from the mass destruction that Israel has wrought upon the Gaza Strip in the past 20 months. On June 30th, Israel dropped a 500-pound bomb on this cafe, destroying it completely, slaughtering over 30 people and injuring over 50 others, most of whom are in critical condition.
It was a missile from an F-16, a military aircraft, not a drone or a bomb or a shell from a boat. The F-16 shook the place. It struck this place, as you can see, pools of blood, piles of martyrs. I mean, if you had seen the scene from the beginning, there were piles of bodies.
The bombing was like an earthquake. I arrived and there was blood everywhere. I saw men martyred. I saw women and girls blown apart. This is a rest area. This is a cafe. People come here to have a cup of tea to get away from the troubles of the world, from all the pain we see in eastern Gaza. They come here to breathe. Look at the destruction here. It's indescribable. The blood you see around you says everything. Among the over 30 Palestinian people that Israel killed were a number of children, artists, athletes, journalists, and the owner of the cafe, Sahar al-Baqa. Another journalist, Bayan Abu Sultan, was severely wounded. One of these artists was a woman named Amna al-Sami, aged 36. This is her final painting, shared to her Instagram page just 10 days before her death. It depicts 3 dead women with the color red splashed across their bodies. Her caption reads, "The blood of the martyr, blood scented with cardamom." People were quick to point out the chilling resemblance between her final painting and her final moments, as images began to surface from the scene of the bombing of her bloodied body.
Malik Musla was a well-known young boxer in Gaza. She featured in this TV report 5 years ago during COVID. Herself and friends training on the beach near the Al-Baqa Cafe. Her aspirations packed a punch.
معروفة هذه اللعبة إنه بس للأولاد، ولكن لما أنا خشيت هذا المجال حبيتها وأعطتني طاقة إيجابية كتير منيحة، فيعني عادي ممكن بنات وأولاد يلعبوها، وأنا إن شاء الله رح أكمل فيها لحد ما أكبر وأمثل عالم فلسطيني إن شاء الله، ومش رح مش رح أفصل منها.
Malik had a friend, this woman, Nida Al-Mashwari. She'd arranged to meet Malik in the cafe yesterday. They'd had an argument, and Nida had brought Malik a giant teddy bear as a peace offering. This one. Both young women, along with their aspirations, didn't survive the Israeli airstrike. They were among at least 20 people killed.
هذا ما تبقى من أختي كانت قاعدة هان الدبدوب هذا لأختي.
As our team was filming there today, Nida's brother Mohammed arrived to retrieve the gift.
أختي نداء حديد خضر المشهراوي العمر 23 سنة انخطفت في عمر التمر في عمر الزهور. الله يرحمها، ايش بدنا نحكي أكثر من هيك يعني.
The Al-Baqa Cafe was located in one of the few areas in Gaza that is currently under no evacuation or military activity warnings, a so-called safe zone. For anyone that's been paying attention to what's happened in Gaza in the last nearly 2 years, you know that safe zone is a sadistic misnomer. In Gaza, nowhere is safe. In response to the strikes, Israel claims to have taken steps to mitigate civilian harm by using aerial surveillance of the area. This is a self-report. If Israel was closely surveilling the cafe, that means they must have known that the cafe was teeming with civilians and that they just decided to bomb it anyway. That's not a defense, that's an admission of guilt. Much of the mainstream media and political discourse about Israel in the last week has been dominated by conversations about rap artist Bob Villain leading a "Death to the IDF" chant at a music festival. While all these outlets and pundits were in uproar about these words, falsely framing this chant as being anti-Semitic, apparently for this crowd, Jews are the IDF now. Those are the same thing. While this was going on, do you know what the IDF was doing? On the very same day of this massacre elsewhere in Gaza, Israel gunned down over 20 Palestinian people at one of the Gaza so-called humanitarian foundation's aid death traps, which have thus far killed over 500 people, dozens upon dozens every single day, in some of the most brutal and dehumanizing ways imaginable.
شوفوا لفرج العالم ايش بقى حامل وايش بقى شايل. بقى شايل ايش؟ اشهدوا. خلي العالم يشهد انه حامل عدس مش حامل سلاح.
While this was going on, the IDF bombed a school that was being used as a shelter, killing over 50 people, most of them women and children. They were firebombed. Their charred, blackened corpses were broadcast on social media.
فجأة لقينا الخيمة فوقينا والنار بتشتغل. ايش اللي صار مش عارفين. ايش بدنا نقول أكتر من هيك؟ ايش بدنا نعمل؟ مش حرام الأطفال كلهم محروقين حرق. حرام اللي بيصير هذا حرام.
ما ضلش عيشة يبيدونا ويريحونا خلص ما ضلش عيشة إلنا. بناتي تتدرعوا. هاي بنت أخويا ست ماريا وأولادها وجوزها. بنعرفوا معارك حسبي الله عليهم.
I doubt you saw these images because instead of covering these massacres, the media and political classes have been busy protecting the soldiers who did this from words at a concert. It's hard to capture with language the contempt I hold for a world that believes criticizing a genocidal army is anti-Semitic terrorism and that committing genocide is self-defense. It feels like the world has been turned upside down. Now, it is becoming harder for the media to completely ignore atrocities committed by Israel like this cafe bombing, given their frequency. The Guardian's pieces on this massacre were fairly thorough and used language that approached an accurate recounting of the extent of the atrocity. Same with Channel 4's report that took time to tell the life stories of 3 victims of the massacre. Still, though, the airwaves remain rife with propaganda supporting Israel in these actions in ways that are both overt and implied. To take 2 examples of some of the more explicit propaganda from the Times of Israel and the Jewish Chronicle, these pieces largely center claims from the IDF, like the claim that they are in the process of reviewing the strike. This is a tactic Israel uses to avoid international scrutiny and deny any sort of independent investigations into their war crimes. The pieces uncritically cite claims about the so-called civilian harm reduction with surveillance, of course neglecting to point out that if they knew who was there and they killed civilians, then that means they knew they were killing civilians. Both outlets make sure to refer to the Gaza Health Ministry as being Hamas-run and point out the supposed lack of independent verification for the death toll, while implying that the Health Ministry, which is again Hamas-run, is obfuscating the victim's combatant status. The combat in question being, sitting at a table and drinking coffee. The articles go on to victim blame with claims that Gaza City has been subject to widespread evacuation orders this week as the IDF intensifies operations in the area. They're lying by omission here, of course, because again, this cafe was not located in an evacuation zone. The marginally more subtle forms of media whitewashing come from outlets like Haaretz and the New York Times. Haaretz did not cover this massacre as a standalone story. They only included it in their Israel at War scrolling timeline. Were you to open up the New York Times article on this massacre, you would find some important details missing. They make no mention of the fact that among the people that Israel slaughtered were multiple children and multiple journalists. You would find them describing Israel's record-breaking child-killing massacre that unilaterally shattered the ceasefire in mid-March as Israel resuming its fighting. Yes, fighting. That's what killing 400 civilians, most of them children, in their sleep is. It's fighting. Readers of the New York Times would find them doing what the Times of Israel did, placing claims of evacuation from unrelated areas immediately following their retelling of the bombing. The strike came a day after the Israeli military issued evacuation warnings for parts of Gaza City, signaling that it would intensify operations there. No mention whatsoever that the area was not under evacuation orders. Readers of the New York Times would find them claiming that Israel's blockade on humanitarian aid ended in late May, which is a lie. The blockade is still in place. Every long-standing aid organization operating in Gaza is completely blocked from bringing aid into the Strip. The only aid coming in is just a trickle, completely inadequate, and it's coming through the killing fields. That is the Israel-devised, US-backed Gaza so-called humanitarian foundation that has committed repeated mass killings of starving Palestinian people.
Testimonies and videos obtained by the Associated Press show American contractors guarding aid distribution sites inside Gaza are using live ammunition and stun grenades as hungry Palestinians scramble for food.
Sources from within the IDF have described they are being ordered to intentionally open live fire on crowds of starving Palestinian civilians. This is what the New York Times considers Israel resuming the flow of humanitarian aid. It's very humanitarian of Israel to do that. I would call omissions and misdirections like this glaring, but for the New York Times, this is just standard editorial practice. For one of, if not the most influential papers in the world, uncritically spreading IDF propaganda is standard editorial practice. Munitions experts have identified the weapon used in the attack as an Mk-82, a US-manufactured 500-pound bomb with a 65-foot blast radius and a high-speed shrapnel radius of 200 feet. This is actually the same bomb that was used in another US-backed genocide, this one in Yemen, when Saudi Arabia blew up a school bus with an airstrike in 2018, killing 51 people, including 40 children, most of them under the age of 10. It's a bomb meant to destroy tanks, and they dropped it on a school bus, and in this case, last week, they dropped it on a small seaside cafe made of wood. The point of bringing up the specific munition is just that Israel knew this would cause severe destruction and kill and maim countless civilians that they claimed to know were there, and they used it anyways, because killing and maiming civilians is what they're trying to do. It's what they've been doing for nearly 2 years straight, and well before that, and they're going to keep doing it until someone stops them. Coverage from stories like this often include discussions about military laws of proportionality. Now, even if these discussions happen to be critical of Israel's actions, as some were here in this case, deeming this cafe bombing to be likely unlawful, it's still just repulsive that this practice is being continued at all in the context of a genocide. Any of the media outlets introducing proportionality into the conversation know that Israel's goals are not military in nature. Israel's not making military proportionality assessments. The response for their actual goals has been entirely proportionate, but that's because their actual goal is genocide, to kill and displace as many Palestinians as they can at the maximum rate that international political constraints will allow. It is pure insanity to exclude that context in a conversation about proportionality. Doing this is just a way to maintain the lie that this is some kind of conflict or war against a military and not an extermination campaign against an entire people. Having said that, Israel itself isn't even bothering to make claims of proportionality anymore. They just say Hamas and keep it moving because they can, and the world will stay silent and no one will hold them accountable. And that's what they did in this case. They didn't identify any high-ranking military commanders or give any proof that Hamas members were even present. And not that it would change the moral calculus of blowing up a cafe teeming with civilians in any way, but every single witness that was interviewed after the strike said that there were only civilians there. What we do know about potential targets, though, is that one of the many groups that Israel considers Hamas, and therefore valid military targets at all times, is journalists. They've killed more journalists than the US Civil War, World Wars I and II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Yugoslav Wars, the Afghanistan War, and the Ukraine War combined. This is done under the pretext that Palestinian journalists in Gaza are Hamas. And we also know that multiple journalists were present at the cafe when they blew it up, and that one of these journalists, Ismail Abu Hattab, had already been the target of an assassination attempt by the IDF. In November of 2023, they blew up an office in a Gaza government media building in a targeted airstrike. The attack left Abu Hattab permanently disfigured and nearly led to the amputation of his left leg. If you're someone that sees stories like this and finds yourself asking, how could they do this? The answer to that question is very simple. They're doing this because they're committing a genocide. Israel destroys the only places of solace left in Gaza because they are committing a genocide, and they do not want Palestinians to have any solace. Israel assassinates journalists en masse because they are committing a genocide, and they want to hide that fact from the world as best they can. They've turned Gaza into a kill zone. For them, every Palestinian is a valid military target. Men, women, children, elderly people, babies, everyone. And the reason that they've done this is because they are committing a genocide. If we understand that simple principle, a principle that is universally agreed upon by independent human rights and humanitarian organizations, Holocaust and genocide scholars, international criminal courts, basically everyone except for Israel and its supporters, then all of these actions make perfect sense. Massacres like this, tragic and horrific as they may be, are no longer surprising. Genocide is what Israel and its population wants, and until someone with the power to stop them does something, ending weapons shipments, international sanctions, or military intervention, their goal of completing that genocide is what Israel is going to get.